Good evening and welcome to the July 23, 2025 Hybrid Planning Commission meeting. I am Chair Dan Thompson. Tonight's Hybrid Planning Commission meeting is being brought to you by Zoom. Welcome to all and thank you for joining us tonight. We'll do roll call now. Commissioners, please have your microphones turned on for the roll call. Deputy Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Thompson,
Here.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Here.
Commissioner Hughes, here, Commissioner Neese,
Here.
and Commissioner Perez.
Here.
Thank you.
The Planning Commission meets in person and utilizes the Zoom platform for remote participation. I will do my best to recognize commissioners in the order in which hands are raised. After being recognized, you may then ask your question. I'll now move to a revised order of business. Before we begin, I'd like to recommend that we change the order of the regular business agenda. After the minutes, I'd like to recommend that we, 1, discuss PCB 25-14, a study session on the omnibus ordinance related to permanent regulations for housing production and permit streamlining. And 2, finish with the third reading on PCB 25-13 regarding permit regulations for temporary uses and structures, including outdoor dining. Commissioners, if there are no objections, may I have a motion to approve the revised order of business?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion by Deputy Chair Gibson and seconded by Commissioner Perez to approve the revised order of business. Any discussion on this item? Deputy Clerk, please conduct a roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Hughes? Aye. Vice Chair Gibson?
Aye.
Commissioner Neese?
Aye.
Commissioner Perez?
Aye.
And Chair Thompson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Our first item of business is public appearances. This is an opportunity for anyone to speak to the commission about issues of concern, except items requiring a public hearing, any quasi-judicial matters, or campaign-related matters. Deputy Clerk, is there anyone who has signed up for public appearances as of 4 p.m. today who wishes to address the commission?
No, Chair, we do not have anyone signed up.
Since no one is signed to speak, we will now move to regular business. The first item of regular business is to review and consider approving the June 10 special meeting minutes. Commissioners, may I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion by Vice Chair Gibson and a second by Commissioner Hughes to approve the minutes. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, Deputy Clerk, please conduct a roll call vote.
Chair Thompson?
Aye.
Commissioner Perez?
Aye.
Commissioner Neese?
Abstain since I wasn't present.
Vice Chair Gibson?
Aye.
And Commissioner Hughes? Aye. Thank you.
Next, we will move to the staff presentation and discussion of Agenda Bill 25-14 study session, omnibus ordinance related to permanent regulations for housing production and permanent streamlining. Welcome, Principal Planner Adam Zach.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. I've got some slides for us tonight. So tonight we'll be taking a look at, this will be your first study session on a proposed omnibus ordinance related to permanent regulations for housing production and permit streamlining. For the next one, the purpose tonight is to brief you on the scope of work that was approved by the City Council last week for that omnibus ordinance and summarize some of the compliance issues that the ordinance will address, some of the topics that we'll be looking at over the next couple of meetings. To start with some background, since in the last couple of years, the Washington State Legislature has adopted many bills that require local jurisdictions, cities, and counties to amend their development code. Since 2021, the city of Mercer Island has adopted several interim ordinances to comply with that statewide legislation. And those interim ordinances, they are good. They establish temporary regulations for a period of 1 year and then can be renewed for 6 months at a time after that. And so we've had these on the books for a while, and we've been going through the process of renewing and keeping these interim ordinances going. And the intention here is that this bill or this ordinance will address some of those interim ordinances and the compliance with the state law that we're required to do. The scope of work for this project was approved by the city council on July 15th, so last Tuesday. And the scope of work plans for up to 5 planning commission meetings to take a look at this ordinance and get your input and complete the legislative review. That would include a public hearing that we're planning for September. And the intention of that is to complete your review by the end of October, so the city council can consider permanent regulations before the end of this year. We're working backwards from that. I don't know what that sound was. This omnibus ordinance, I don't know if it's my phone or the omnibus ordinance will adopt amendments to the code kind of throughout the development code to address all of these interim ordinances that we've adopted in the last couple of years, with a couple of notable exceptions we'll go over in a minute. And all of these amendments all kind of relate to housing production and permit review. So they're all kind of under that one umbrella of housing production. And the reason that we're proposing an omnibus ordinance to address these issues is that we have several sections of the code that are now amended by these interim ordinances where there's overlapping interim amendments. And so by doing it all kind of together, it'll allow us to look kind of comprehensively at those amendments and consider kind of the whole shebang at the same time. And this, so you're going to see a pretty large body of work as we bring forward this omnibus. There are 7 topics that we'll be seeking to address with this omnibus ordinance. They're listed here in this table, which was also provided in the Planning Commission bill. I did put a couple of stars on here. There's a couple of topics where we will have some additional amendments that aren't addressed in those interim ordinances. So where you see a gold star as we're working through this and kind of going over it, there may be some additional amendments that are proposed that are over and above what the interim ordinances have enacted. And I'll kind of talk about each of those individually. But the first topic that we'll be looking at is House Bill 1220, which relates to affordable and emergency housing. And most of the work for this bill was wrapped up in our comprehensive plan update, but there's a couple of interim ordinances, or there's one interim ordinance that is still kind of hanging around, and that's ordinance 25C05. Senate Bill 6015 relates to residential parking requirements, and we adopted interim ordinance 25C08. That was the most recent renewal for that, addressing that bill. House Bill 1293 relates to clear and objective design standards. We just recently were required to comply with that by June 30th. And so we adopted interim ordinance 25C11 to address that bill. Senate Bill 5290 relates to permit review timelines. And there were 2 stages of compliance that were required for that. So the first round, or both of those were adopted in 2024 with ordinance 24C17, which expires by the end of the year. So if we get this taken care of, we won't have to renew that interim ordinance. House Bill 1998 is the one of these bills that we actually haven't addressed with interim ordinances. So this will be a new section or new amendments to address the co-living housing requirements that were updated. Then we're also going to address the Design Commission as we go through. The City Council decided in June to dissolve the Design Commission. So as we're going through these code sections, we'll be working to make sure that the decision-making authority for design review, be it the Design Commission or code official, is clear in the amendments, kind of in light of that council decision. And then finally, there's ordinance 24C18 adopted some interim regulations to address our comprehensive plan implementation. And so we'll need to address that as well. So now we'll kind of walk through each of these individually. So as we're walking through the different bills and things that we're going to be looking at, please feel free to ask any questions. This is really an opportunity to kind of get familiar with these before we roll out a pretty large raft of code amendments. So we want to make sure you've had your chance to ask us our questions or your questions. Three of the key topics that are not going to be included in the omnibus ordinance are middle housing, ADUs, and unit lot subdivision. So all three of these topics have had recent statewide legislation that change how we as a city can regulate these three uses. And we're planning on bringing forward a separate scope of work for that project. And that's to allow us some additional public participation opportunities, given the high degree of interest in these three topics. These really relate to our single family zones. And so there's been a fair amount of interest from the public about how these things will work and what those regulations might look like. So we expect to bring forward that scope of work early in next year. And so we'll have kind of more detail about these three topics. But the headline here is that middle housing, ADUs, and unit lot subdivision will not be in the omnibus ordinance. So they'll be in a separate project. So the first thing we'll take a look at tonight is House Bill 1220. As I mentioned, this is referring to or related to affordable and emergency housing. This bill made pretty significant changes to how cities and counties can have to plan for housing with their comprehensive plan. And as I mentioned, we addressed most of that through our comprehensive plan periodic review, but there's still a lingering interim ordinance related to emergency housing that we need to adopt permanent regulations to address and remain in compliance with with House Bill 1220. The Commerce issued some guidance. Actually, that's my next slide. Sorry. So the interim ordinance that we've adopted to address House Bill 1220 did a couple of things in the code. It amended the definition of social service transitional housing to clarify that also includes emergency housing and transitional housing. And then it also, and those two emergency housing and transitional housing, it refers back to the definitions from the state law, just to make that connection clear. It also amended the definition of special needs group housing in our local code to clarify that includes permanent supportive housing as defined by the state. And by doing those two things, it complied with HB 1220's requirement that we allow emergency housing and transitional housing and permanent supportive housing in our residential zones. So we work through it that way. As we're looking at amendments to comply with HB 1220, the Department of Commerce issued some guidance as we were completing our comprehensive plan periodic review that indicated there may be a couple of additional amendments that we need to take a look at. We need to take a look at the spacing requirements for these uses that are established in the code. And then also the permitting processes that are required for these different emergency housing types. So this one gets a gold star because this is one of the pieces that we'll be taking a look at when we bring forward that omnibus ordinance. So that concludes my 1220 section. Do any of you have any questions about House Bill 1220?
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a couple of questions and thank you for the visibility to this. Reviewing spacing requirements, I imagine we'll get into a lot more detail at a later time, but can you just highlight that? You know, spacing requirements, is that congregate or is that individual or?
So the code currently requires a 1,000-foot spacing between each of the social service transitional housing developments. And it also requires that those types of emergency housing be spaced 600 feet from places where children are known to congregate, so schools and parks and churches. The Commerce guidance has indicated that we need to review those to make sure that they're connected to health and safety standards. And so we need to take a look at that as part of our legislative review in this process. Any other questions on 1220? I'm sure there will be more as we keep rolling through here. So the next bill that we'll be addressing with the omnibus ordinance is Senate Bill 6015, which establishes residential parking requirements. This really changed what cities can require for parking for new residential developments. It specifies that garages and carports may not be required for residential development. There's some specific kind of technical pieces of this that parking spaces in tandem need to count towards meeting the minimum at a rate of 1 space per every 20 linear feet. And parking spaces may not be required to exceed 8 feet by 20 feet. Unless the ADA requires that. So we'll be taking a look at those standards for parking. There's also some requirements about grass block pavers being allowed for parking. And that existing paved parking lots are not required to change the size of the existing parking spaces for residential development as it occurs. And then there's this kind of odd and complicated requirement here at the end where the city may not require off-street parking for residential projects if compliance with tree retention would otherwise make that proposed residential development infeasible. We've already adopted the interim regulations to do all of these things. We'll just be kind of making those permanent. Any questions on 6015 before we keep rolling?
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I remember, this was, I think, 2017 when they were doing the RDS update. And for some of the smaller lots, they reduced the 2 covered stalls to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I remember a builder who came in and, because there was a lot of contention about it, and he said, well, nobody's going to build a house on Mercer Island without at least a 2-car garage.
Mm-hmm.
It's just practical for the customer who usually comes here. And I follow the permit bulletin. I don't see too many houses being built without garages, to store all your stuff. Do you think that there will be very many, at least traditional single-family homes on Mercer Island that are built without some type of garage?
I mean, that does seem unlikely. I think the thrust of this bill is essentially that we just can't require that, but the market will probably demand certain things of development that we don't have to require. Really, the amendments to comply here are going to be just focused kind of on what the state law requires and making sure that we're not counter to that requirement. But to answer your question, I mean, I think that the market will fill in as the market does. Yeah. So the next bill we'll be addressing is Senate Bill 5290, which relates to permit review timelines. This is really this bill really focuses on our permit processes that are established in Chapter 1915 of the City Code. And it requires that Interior alterations must be exempt from site plan review. So we're not necessarily reviewing those for setbacks if they're entirely within the existing building. The more impactful thing for the city of Mercer Island is that there's specific requirements around determinations of completeness. We must issue them for certain kinds of permit review. So we need to make sure that we're issuing those determinations consistent with the requirements here. And then the other big piece of 5290 is that it sets specific timelines for issuing permit decisions for certain land use reviews. And it's tied to whether or not public notice is required for that land use review. So for our basic land use reviews that do not require a public notice, the required timeline for issuing a decision is 65 days. For those reviews that do require a public notice, the permit review timeline is 100 days. And then anything requiring a public hearing, the timeline is 170 days. And the bill lays out some different ways that this shot clock kind of starts and stops depending on if more information is required or the applicant may request a hold on their review. So we just need to kind of establish those in the code and make sure that we're meeting those. And the part of this that has some teeth is that the city's required to meet these deadlines. And if we exceed those deadlines in our review, we have to either discount or refund some of the permit fee. So the city has some skin in the game. And the intention here is to make sure that permitting is kind of more consistent and more predictable for applicants, particularly for housing development, so that that's one of the ways to kind of help with the housing problems that we're seeing in the state. Again, with this one, we've already, with the interim regulations, we've already adopted the amendments necessary to implement this. The omnibus ordinance will just be making those or proposing those interim ordinance regulations be made permanent for the development code. Any questions on 5290?
Yeah, are those currently being met?
That I don't know. They've been on the
That would be
books.
good to know,
Allison
yeah.
could probably.
Yeah, it's something we're required to track as well. There's reporting requirements every quarter to the state. And so we've really just started doing that reporting over the last 6 months. And I believe that we have been meeting them so far. For the 65-day and 100-day type permits, those are simpler permits, and those typically are done well under that time frame. And so it's not a problem. The ones that get tricky are the more complex permits that have sometimes multiple different land use reviews and public hearings. So those are where we need to keep an eye on things because those can progress over a longer timelines in some cases.
Is this all residential or is it residential, commercial, industrial? Is it?
It's all review types. There's a specific,
Oh.
the bill specifies certain reviews that aren't subject to it, but
Okay.
it is more than residential. Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I'll keep rolling here. We're trucking. This is good. So House Bill 1998 related to co-living housing. This one gets a big gold star on it because this is something that we haven't addressed with interim regulations. We're not required to comply with HB 1998 until the end of this year. So if we wrapping up the omnibus ordinance before the end of the year, we'll avoid having to do any interim ordinances, which I think there was a collective cheer on the planning staff's part that we didn't need to do that. So co-living housing is like typically referred to as something like a rooming house or a boarding house. It's a type of residential development that where there's some kind of communal space, usually like a kitchen and a living room, and then individual rooms are rented to folks. And so we're required to allow those in all of our mixed use and multifamily zones. And there's some stipulations about what we can require for co-living housing. We cannot require parking within 1/2 mile walking distance of major transit. We can't require parking at a rate greater than 1/4 of a space per sleeping unit. And any development standards can't be any more restrictive than what generally applies to residential development in the underlying zone. And that the review process needs to be similar to what's required for other residential uses in the zone. So we couldn't require a conditional use permit for co-living housing and then allow multifamily housing outright, that kind of thing. So this section or amendments to address this bill in particular will be entirely new for you to review as we get through here. A couple other requirements for co-living housing from the bill. We can't exclude co-living housing from participating in our affordable housing incentives. So that would include like the height bonus that we currently allow in town center. And for the purpose of calculating density, we can't count those sleeping units as more than 1/4 of a dwelling unit. And again, we need to comply with this bill before the end of the year. Any questions on co-living housing?
Yeah, just on the definitions, can you just briefly summarize the difference between, thought I saw a term that was, there's sleeping unit, there's dwelling unit, and then there was one other term I thought you used.
So I'll address those two. I'm slipping my mind what the third might be, but a sleeping unit would be like that individually locked or rented room within the co-living housing unit. So for example, in college, I lived in one of these and it was like, we had a kitchen, it was like a shared kitchen, shared living room and bathroom. And then we each had our own rooms in there and my room would have been a sleeping unit. The whole thing would have been a dwelling unit. So a dwelling unit is something that has living, eating, sanitation, and it's a complete unit.
Is
Does
there
that
any
clarify?
limit on the number of residents that can be housed in a dwelling unit?
The state law doesn't specify a requirement for that.
But there is state law saying that we can't regulate how many unrelated people live in a dwelling unit.
Okay,
So
I was thinking,
Mhm.
I was remembering something.
that
from
came
the-
up a couple years ago. So I think, yeah, we can't really regulate the overall number of people living there.
So dwelling unit is the entire structure, sleeping unit is the locked bedroom.
Yes. So if you had 5 sleeping units, you could have 5 sleeping units, it'd be a 5-bedroom apartment. The 5-bedroom apartment would be the dwelling unit, if that helps.
Is there any case where you might have like 3 sleeping units that are locked from the rest of the unit? And is that a unit called something? Just want to be able to track all the terms.
I don't think that would be the location of the doors, I don't think would impact whether or not it was considered co-living.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure we'll handle this at a different time, but I mean, obviously this is just pertaining to zoning and not building codes, fire, life safety, density, exit standards, that sort of thing. True.
Right, so any of these would have to still meet the building code, the fire code, and other life safety requirements.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
All right, we'll keep rolling. The next bill we'll be taking a look at here is House Bill 1293. This is related to clear and objective design standards. In 2023, the legislature enacted this bill, and it really changes how cities can regulate building design. And it sets some pretty specific standards that relate to our design standards. Local design review standards must be clear and objective. I've bolded that here because that's where this bill intersects with our code the most. So clear and objective means that the standards need to establish at least one measurable standard by which an applicant can determine whether or not a proposed development meets that standard. And kind of throughout our design standards, before we amended them to comply with this bill, there were a lot of flexible standards that didn't necessarily establish that one clear, measurable way of determining. It was a lot of that review was delegated to the design commission to make that determination at the time of application. So this bill probably has some of the kind of the most amendments associated with it, because most of our design standards in chapters 1911 and 1912 needed some kind of amendment to meet this clear and objective standard. Then the other requirement from 1293 that impacts us is we can only require review at one public meeting. And so our previous design review process required a study session with the design commission prior to application. And then there was a design commission public hearing where they would then review the application after the application was submitted. So what happened with our interim regulations is we removed the requirement for the study session. Most of the information, now that our objectives are clear or now that our standards are clear and objective, at the pre-application meeting, we can go through with the applicant. Staff can just kind of list, these are the things you need to meet. And because they're measurable and clear, an applicant can determine whether they meet it or not.
Maybe I can ask a specific question, just as an example, just to have an understanding. And just so everybody knows, I was on the design commission and, had to interpret this all the time. For example, in a commercial building downtown, there's requirements for a variegated facade. That it's not monolithic, it's not that there's variations. I think in this instance, you'd be saying something along the lines of there are 3 variables in the storefront. And I mean, is that generally what you're saying?
Yeah, so
just quantifying.
modulation is a good example. I don't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but
Yeah.
the previous code, before we amended it to comply with 1293, it had a lot of standards for modulation that basically said up to the design commission to determine.
Yeah.
And now we took in those standards, the way we amended them, it just says you need to do this, this, and this for modulation. And it basically used the same requirements that were in the code. It just removed some of that flexibility for the design commission to determine that during their review.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So you'll see the draft of code amendments will be annotated to kind of show which of these bills the amendments relate to. You'll see a lot of HB 1293 in the draft because there were a lot of changes in there. At the same time that we were adopting, or that the council was adopting ordinance 25C11, which made the changes for this, they also decided to dissolve the design commission and reassign their quasi-judicial review to the hearing examiner. And so that leads us to this the next piece that we'll be looking at, and that's the design commission. This one also gets a gold star on it because we haven't, the interim ordinance or the ordinance that dissolved the design commission did it in such a way that further amendments to the code were not necessary. But we still kind of throughout the code have these references to the design commission that work, but we can clarify through some of these amendments, we're going to clarify whether that's a hearing examiner or code official, or just to make it consistent with that ordinance that the council already adopted. So you'll see kind of throughout the draft where we've done that. Any questions on the design commission before? Great. And then finally, we adopted an interim ordinance at the same time that the comprehensive plan was adopted to implement the comprehensive plan. There were some changes to the code in town center to increase the building capacity there and adjust some of the affordability requirements to comply with those state requirements like House Bill 1220 that required us to plan for certain affordability levels. Specifically, our implementation ordinance increased the maximum building height in the TC5 and TC4 plus sub areas by 2 stories. So those are now have a maximum height of 7 stories. And then in the TC4 sub area, that was increased by an additional story there. And then it also increased the percentage of units that must be affordable to get that height bonus. And it deepened some of our affordability requirements. So it required more units and those units to be more affordable or affordable at a lower income bracket. So again, those have already been on the books now for about a year, and this would just make those amendments, or this ordinance will make those amendments permanent. Any questions on?
I do have one. I remember following this. I hope it's not off topic. What was the reason for not increasing the height limit in the TC3 south of 29th?
So I don't want to speak for the council, but that was one of the things that we analyzed as part of this process, and they elected to not go that route. We did have some indication that there was potential displacement risk there, and so they wanted to like hold off on doing that at this round. The comp plan does include policy direction to take a look at potential code amendments in the future. So that could be, it's not like forever off the table, but it's not something that we'll be considering in this process.
Okay, I always thought it was, and I presented this to the council, a little unfair because when they redid the town center in, I think, 2016, they reduced the height to 3 stories because you didn't need to have a retail. And then everybody realized that retail space is a critical, significant public amenity. And so they added retail south of 29th after the moratorium, but you're still stuck at the 3 stories. Anyway, thanks.
It's something I'm sure will come before this body at some point in the future, but we don't have plans to do it anytime soon. So, all right. So that actually concludes, those are the 7 topics that we'll be taking a look at with the omnibus ordinance. I wanted to kind of go through the process that we're going to use to gather your comments and feedback on the draft. We're on a bit of a compressed timeline, and so I wanted to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page on this, so that moving forward, we can be really efficient with our meeting time. So as we're receiving, we'll be making a draft available for comments in August. We're currently working on preparing the draft and getting it reviewed. And then as we are gathering comments from the Planning Commission, we're planning to divide them into 2 buckets. You'll be familiar with buckets by now, but with the intent to kind of separate out those amendments that are proposing something kind of over and above what we're looking at with this ordinance. So something that would like establish a new requirement or expand existing requirements, because we're really trying to stay focused on what the interim ordinances have done and like complying with that. We want to pull those ideas out so that we don't lose them, but we're not necessarily like, we don't want to get bogged down on those. And then we're planning to establish a planning commission parking lot where we can kind of keep those ideas around, but rather than get mired in a discussion about setbacks, if we've already got it kind of figured out in the code, we might hold those. So we'll walk through those amendments together and we can kind of decide which get categorized as part of the process. But we do plan on kind of separating those out so that we stay focused on completing the compliance issues and addressing the compliance issues that we have there that we have before us, because there's plenty of those to take our time. And then, but we don't want to lose those ideas if we have those ideas for a future time. So we'll walk through that, but I just wanted to go over that now because again, we're kind of at the start. And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Dan, can I ask one question? And
Sure.
And this is like the 30,000 square foot view. And we've talked to people. You and the council have spent a lot of time on this,
Mhm.
and these are state requirements. And my understanding is the council, at least at this time, gave direction to do the minimum legally necessary to implement these. So when we look at these, aren't we kind of a little bit boxed in on our amendments? I think everybody should kind of understand before we go off on flights of fancy that if you try to lower, you're probably going to run into violating the state law.
Mhm.
But then if you want to expand what's in there, you're going to be running into the council's direction to not do that.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't, there wasn't, when the scope of work was adopted, there wasn't specific direction about, anything like a minimum, like comply to the minimum, but there was an implication that we've had these interim ordinances on the books. They address the minimum, and so we want to stay kind of focused on addressing those. There is a problem if we do, all of these things are kind of connected, and so if we start turning the levers and dials too much, there is a problem that we could run afoul of some of these issues that I've been talking about here. So we do need to proceed with some caution. It's also worth pointing out too that all of the interim ordinances that we've adopted, when they were adopted, the council held a public hearing on those ordinances. And then every time they've been adopted, renewed, there's a required public hearing at that time. So there has been some like opportunities for public comment on these different bills. We're just kind of getting it all kind of combined together so we can do it comprehensively. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I have two questions. One is if there's a parking lot, what's the follow-up on that? Would that be the docket in the fall?
Yes, so the docket is the process by which amendments that haven't been added to the city's work plan can be proposed and the council can consider those. So that would be the way by which the planning commission can request changes to the code. And you'll become very familiar with the docket process very soon. Every year, the docket is a process that is open. We accept applications for proposed amendments in September, and then the planning commission will consider their recommendation in October, and then the council ultimately decides what to place on the city's work plan. So it'll be coming to the planning commission before you know it. Yeah.
Okay, and then my second question is, with all the state laws, and they've changed so much over the last couple of years, there've been new and new and new. And then the direction here is amendments if you think one needs to be made to comply with the law. So I have a question because, the rumor mills on Mercer Island are pretty wild. Is there any indication is there legislative or legal action related to us not being in compliance that we should be aware of as we're looking at this? Should we be addressing things that maybe have been suggested aren't in compliance?
If staff tells you that something is required for compliance, that will be our recommendation that we do it to comply. So it depends. Some of these bills, some of them amend the Growth Management Act, some of them amend other parts of the state law. In general, we should comply with the state law. So if there is
I'll
a,
clarify my question. There have been rumors that there's been suggestions that the city might not be in compliance. Are there any pending legal actions against the city?
There was an appeal of the comprehensive plan that is currently underway. There was a hearing on June 30th, and we're expecting a decision from the Growth Management Hearing Board on August 5th.
Can you
related to that
send
matter.
us reference to anything that's publicly available on that so we're aware?
Yeah, I
Or
I
is that
think all the
something we should
briefs are
go?
publicly available from the appellant in the city. And then I'm not sure if any of the recordings are made public from the actual hearing.
And then when is the resolution of that?
We're expecting a decision on August 5th. And,
August 5th.
depending on the findings of the hearing board, they could support the city's position, they could support the appellant's position, or it could be a mix. And so there may be follow-on actions that we need to take within a fairly short timeline to comply if the board finds that we're not in compliance in some way.
Is there anything in that appeal that's related to what we're looking at right now?
Yes.
Okay.
The step housing was discussed fairly extensively in the hearing, and some of the other ways that we're complying with affordable housing requirements, and, the provision of housing for each of the income brackets.
Thank you.
All right. Let's keep rolling here. We're close to it now. So I wanted to go over the schedule. As I mentioned, this is a little bit of a compressed timeline. I shouldn't say compressed. It's just gonna be a little intense September through October for the group here. So our schedule we're planning to release the code amendment package for public review and a 30-day comment period on August 11th. And then we're planning your first touch, your first briefing on those code amendments to be September 10th, following the legislative recess. And then a public hearing on those code amendments on September 24th. So 2 meetings in September. And then if necessary, the deliberations following that public hearing can continue to October 8th and 22nd. Again, those are if necessary, but we need to complete the Planning Commission's recommendation by the end of October so that we can deliver that recommendation to the City Council in time for them to consider the amendments by the end of the year. And then we'd be looking at a first reading with the council on the 4th of November, with the second reading tentatively scheduled for the 18th. So it'll be relatively quick. Yeah,
Just following up on my prior question, if we're not gonna find out about the outcome of the hearing examiner till early August, the schedule seems extremely aggressive. I'm not assuming any outcome here, but even if the outcome's mixed or has minor things we need to shift, it seems like we would be unable to do a public release before then. Do you have any thoughts on that?
if there is something that comes from the hearings board decision that requires some kind of amendment, we would plan that in its own process. So this is really, this project is really focused on addressing those interim regulations related to housing and permit streamlining. So we want to make sure we're going to keep a real tight focus on that. And then again, if there's something related to that comp plan appeal, we would resolve that through its own project.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible that some of the components could already be included in what we've scoped here for this omnibus. It's possible that there could be things over and above that would be a separate work item that we would need to complete within 6 months after that decision, most likely.
And I see our city attorney, Kim, has raised her hand. I'm sure she's been jumping at the bit here.
I just wanted to add that only one of these interim ordinances was included in the litigation before the Growth Management Hearings Board, and that's the ordinance that added the floors in town center. So that is the only one that was included specifically.
All right, so that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any other questions, as long as they're not about the hearings board. No, that's okay.
One question, probably more of a comment. A lot of the interim regulations, it sounds like there were public comments provided to the city council when they were adopted. It would be useful to us to see what those comments were, if they are documented somewhere, so that we can kind of see what that feedback has been. Also, it would be useful to understand kind of a history of what permits have or what projects have been permitted that do take advantage of these interim ordinances that wouldn't have been allowed prior, just to kind of get some additional context of how are people actually using these regulations. It obviously doesn't apply to the co-living since that's not interim yet. And then any other city impacts like the code review deadlines was a good question of, you know, how is this actually playing out in after it's implemented, and start to get some of that context would be helpful as we dive into our review.
Sure, yeah.
Allison, you mentioned that the city cannot regulate the number of occupants. I think it was related to the co-housing. Is that specific to mixed use and co-housing zones, or now is that anywhere, even single family zones?
Correct. We can't regulate the number of unrelated occupants in a dwelling unit.
So somebody could conceivably have like a 12-bedroom house with 12. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, or you could have a family of 10 living in a 2-bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give it a little bit of a comment. Thank you very much for that clear presentation, and the amount of change that's coming, you know, that's going to land entirely in your lap is extraordinary. So it'll be an interesting journey for us all.
It's our lab, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Our lab, exactly.
Right. Thank you, yeah. All right, well, we'll have plenty to do in the coming months. All right, thank you. Yeah.
All righty, well, thank you, Adam. Is Planning Commission Agenda Bill PCB 25-13 on permanent regulations for temporary uses and structures, including outdoor dining, park zone development code amendment. Welcome Deputy CPD Director Allison Van Gorp and Senior Planner Molly McGuire.
Thank you, Chair. Molly's going to be doing the presentation on this, so just give her 1 second to get her laptop plugged in over here, and we'll get that going.
All right, there we go. So let's begin. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is for continued deliberations for commerce on public property and temporary uses and structures on private property, and to provide your recommendation. So the process for tonight, I'll go through a presentation and then we'll go through our deliberations. So that includes the secondary motions for categories A and B, which were identified in the PCB, and then secondary motions for minor proposed amendments that came in over the last couple of days, and the substantive amendments, and then end with a recommendation. As a quick refresher, we started this process in February with a briefing on these on the interim regulations that were adopted and the draft code. And then on June 10th, we had a public hearing where the Planning Commission had a motion and made gave staff some direction by consensus for a portion of that draft. That brings us to today. So in June, the Planning Commission made motions to recommend these listed log numbers from Exhibit 2 from PCB 25-12, and that was the old matrix. So those would be incorporated into the motion as they are listed here. And those are also included in the inline draft. I think it's in black, strike through and underlines. So when we went through the proposed draft on June 10th, we had posed some questions divided into buckets 1, 2, and 3. And as we were going through those questions, there was a lot of feedback and direction by consensus from the Planning Commission. And those are categorized into category A, A1, A2, and A3, as shown in the draft inline and then in the PCB outlined there. And so as a quick refresher of what we went through on June 10th, bucket 1 was for exemptions from the permit requirements for temporary uses. We discussed kind of what uses would be exempt from permit requirements. And kind of landed on some terms depending on whether or not those uses comply with the underlying regulations. So that was 70 days over a 90-day period for those that do comply, and then 48 hours for those that do not comply. And we also discussed some size restrictions on tents associated with garage sales, estate sales, etc. Category A2 addresses the direction that was given for bucket 2 for normal temporary uses. So those are the ones that are not exempt from permit requirements, but are not necessarily at the higher level review. And so Planning Commission direction was for a type 2 land use review, which would be valid for 5 years subject to renewal. The renewal process was not included in the draft for these normal temporary uses because in the original Planning Commission recommendation, the renewal permit would have been the same review type. And so procedurally, these reviews would have been the same. So adding in this extra permit type really seemed to complicate the application and review process unnecessarily. So as proposed, someone with a reoccurring normal temporary use would need to submit a new application every 5 years. But again, this would be the same process as the direction the Planning Commission gave, just without that extra renewal permit type. We also discussed that the normal temporary uses must meet the underlying development standards, and no additional criteria over and above the criteria that was proposed in the original draft was identified. However, we did move some criteria up from the original, I think it was titled additional criteria for certain uses, which included food trucks and outdoor dining. We moved those up to this general criteria because we felt it was necessary to cover things like parking specific for outdoor dining and then building and fire code compliance. So that's why those have been moved up and included in there. And this was kind of due to the restructuring from the one permit type to this new tiered approach. Bucket or category A3 addresses bucket 3, which was temporary use deviations. So we got the direction that that would be a type 3 land use review, valid for 5 years, subject to renewal, which expires after 20 years. And the renewals would be subject to the type 2 land use review as an abbreviated review process. So renewals would need to meet the criteria laid out in subsection C3 for documenting that their conditions of approval have been met, no changes have been made, and a complete application would be submitted within 90 days of the expiration. So while drafting, and then we also drafted criteria that would address screening, setbacks, building height, and public benefit for those uses that do not meet the underlying development regulations. While we were drafting this criteria, we kept in mind the initial scope of the temporary structures and uses code amendment, which was docketed to establish a regulatory framework to allow the country club to place a temporary membrane structure. So as drafted, this deviation criteria would allow this structure to be permitted. And we would need to be look at that when we're looking at any proposed amendments to that section. Does anyone have any questions on category A before we move on?
Just curious about the re-review process. Is the application being re-reviewed for all codes, land use, building? So for example, I'm just thinking if, let's say the bubble got permitted and it met all codes, building codes at the time, but something changed. But the building's not changing and they want to put it up again. How is that dealt with if it's going through all reviews again?
So if it was in the, if it's subject to the renewal process, the type 2 review, we would just be reviewing it for compliance with that criteria. So that's the no changes have been made, they've met all conditions of approval, and the renewal must be submitted within a certain time frame. And that one expires after 20 years, so they can renew it as it is 4 times. After that, though, we would look at, they would submit a new type 3 application and we would look at the rest of the code.
Okay, so to protect themselves, they really have to make sure they don't lapse.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question. I was looking through the answers to the amendment matrix. Can you explain how the country club's current conditions so exceed their permitted regulatory limits?
Yeah. Let me- So let me see. I think I summarized it in one of the answers.
I think it's log 7.
Okay, let me pull it up. Yeah, so as currently permitted, the country club, the existing building is around 18,600 square feet. And the tennis bubble structure is 23,800 square feet, which covers the court space. And that was found in the permit documents. Those were sent out a while ago, back, I think, in February. And the lot coverage based on previous permits is around 165,000 square feet. And then they do encroach into their setbacks. The most prominent encroachment would be that 4 feet and a quarter, I think, into the rear yard setback.
Thank you.
Okay.
Are there any other further questions on I guess we'll call it bucket A1?
Yeah, I'm trying to reconcile the MICC 1906-130C2. It says for the deviations, it's listed as type 3. But then when I go down to the table, and that would be
Yeah, I know what
table
you're,
A land use
yeah.
review type, it's listed as type 4. Is that
yeah, that was an error, and that is
Okay.
included as log item 55, I believe,
Okay.
as a minor amendment.
Thanks. So it's type 4, or is it?
It
type
will be, as drafted, it's type 3.
Type 3, okay, thank you.
So just so that I understand the process, do you want a main motion to adopt the ordinance, and then we'll go through A1, 2, and 3?
So if you have changes to A1, 2, or 3 specifically, we can do it that way, or we could adopt all of the A bucket and then go through the other amendments, I believe. Is that
Chair, excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
You have a motion that was tabled at the last meeting that needs to be addressed. It's the main motion, if I'm. It should be in your, it's a motion to recommend that the city council adopt the proposed amendments. You see that in the script?
I do
It's
see,
the main motion that was tabled at the last meeting.
that's right, yeah. So I'm trying to find out what, because I'm thinking that we might be able to quickly adopt A1 and A2, and then we're going to spend our time on A3 or section F of 130, which maybe we'll go through line by line on that for the amendments.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in. I think also looking at the script, it looks like we would bucket all of the A, so A1, 2, and 3 into one motion. That would take care of all the orange on the recommendation. Then the second motion would be accepting all the type B, 1 through whatever number it is. That accepting the A bucket and the B bucket would get us to this draft, is my understanding. And then we can make additional amendments from there. So I know we've got a log with a bunch of amendments that was issued today, but at least to get us to this draft that the staff produced, we would accept the A bucket and the B bucket, and then we'd continue on from there.
That's what I was thinking.
So, yeah.
So the A3 is where we're going to be making amendments, right?
No, we would accept all of A, accept all of B, and then start to amend like section F, for example, after it's accepted.
But we still need to address, correct me if I'm wrong, we still need to address the main motion that was tabled at the last meeting. And that would be the first motion before you addressed the sub motions, which is bucket A and bucket B.
Correct.
You simply put it back on the table and make the motion.
I'd like to make a motion to put the main motion on page 5 back on the table.
I think we should wait for the presentation to end.
Oh.
I just have one more quick slide. So category B is the amendments that were proposed by staff, mostly for consistency and when we moved around all of those sections. So that's B1 through B8. And I can go through and talk about each one of those individually. If you have any questions on them, I'm happy to address those as well, but they are summarized in the PCB.
I do have a question on section G 130. It states that the temporary use or structure may operate for a total of 180 days, and the code official may grant an extension not to exceed 30 days. I thought the planning commission direction was just a hard cap of 180 days with no 30-day extension.
I am not recalling that we talked about that extension piece. I know we talked a lot about the renewals, but I don't necessarily recall that extension.
All right. And that is in bucket B though, right?
Mhm.
So it looks like it is B6. that correct? Yes. So if we want to pull out B6 out of the B, we would,
I would recommend that we just approve B6 and then go back and revisit this 30-day extension because B6 also includes striking the table and other things that are included in here. So I think we want to capture that. And so if we just approve all of the B amendments as a block, then we can, because that 30-day item is addressed in the comments matrix. And I think that's the right place to,
so
address
we
that.
can adopt it and then go back and amend it.
yeah, adopting B6 in this example would not preclude us from going back and proposing an amendment to do that.
Okay.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, so we have the main motion, and this was made by Commissioner Accuse to recommend that the city council adopt the proposed amendments to MICC 19.06.050, commerce on public property as amended, proposed new section MICC 19.06.130, temporary use permits as amended, and proposed amendments to MICC 19.15.030, land use review types as amended. Do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Vice Chair Gibson. Discussion?
Clarification. This is where we start making a motion to amend and accept bucket B. Okay. Yeah. There we go.
All
We got
right.
a secondary motion.
So do you want to make a motion to adopt bucket A,
Yes.
1, 2, and B?
Yes, I'll follow the script here. I move to approve the amendments list under category A as presented in PCB 2513.
Second.
A motion has been made by Vice Chair Gibson to approve the amendments listed under category A as presented in PCB 25-13, seconded by Commissioner Accuse. Is there any discussion?
I think just one clarification is there are portions of this category A that I think we do want to talk about. Again, we'll revisit those after this gets approved, but this helps clear and get us back up to the current draft.
So, right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. All right. Shall we do the roll? Just call the roll.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Accuse,
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay. We now have a secondary motion, category B. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve the amendments listed under category B as presented in PCB 25-13?
So moved.
Second.
All right, Commissioner Neese made a motion to approve the amendments listed under category B as presented in PCB 25-13. It was seconded by Vice Chair Gibson. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Perez,
I just want to make sure that if there was something that Commissioner Hughes wanted to.
It's just a process question for the clerk. I understood that if we were adopting amendments to a motion, that we would not revisit the material that we adopted, or are we still within that main motion able to make amendments even if we approved the amendment?
that's my understanding. From
Okay,
the
thank
way
you.
staff has set it up. Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Commissioner Accuse,
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, how do you want to do this?
I'll start with a motion.
Okay.
All right. I would like to move to accept amendments, the minor amendments, log numbers 13. In 13, that's the first alternate. 14, 15, 18, 25, the staff alternate of 27, 30, 34, 54, and 55.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion by Vice Chair Gibson to adopt minor amendments 3, 13, staff recommended alternative, 14, 15, 18, 22, 25, 27, staff recommended alternative, 30, 34, 46, 47, 54, and 55. Seconded by Commissioner Acuse. Is there any discussion on these, or does anybody?
I'll make a quick correction there. That what's on the screen does not represent my motion. I specifically excluded item 3, 22, 46, and 47,
Okay.
and I can speak to those.
So-
Why don't you go ahead?
Just a point of clarification, in light of that, I'm going to ask you to repeat. I think I have it correct in my notes. I have numbers 13, 14, 15, 18, 25, staff alternative 27, 34, 30, 34, 54, and 55.
That's correct. The one clarification is 13 was the first alternate, because 13 had 2 alternates to choose from.
And so that was the staff alternate?
Just the first alternate. It was not a staff one.
While we look through these, you want to tell us why you left out?
Yeah, I can speak to these in kind of high level. So everything on the list that I recommended for approval is listed as a minor amendment, according to the staff responses. I believe they also they don't materially change the intent of the regulation. The reason that I excluded 3, the staff comment was that this was generally covered elsewhere in the code, so it's not necessary. And that was my own amendment, so I don't think that's necessary. Item 22, similarly, staff mentioned that this was not necessary. It would be, but it could be implemented. Since it's not necessary, I excluded it from my list. And then items 46 and 47 have to do with section F of the temporary structures and private property. And I've got a separate approach to that section entirely, so I've excluded those minor amendments from this list.
Got it. Any other further discussion? I know it's a lot of amendments, but these are the minor amendments. Any comments by staff? Anybody need more time? Kind of. Okay, seeing none, I guess you should call the roll. Good, clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Acuse.
Aye.
Thank you.
Where do you want to go now?
I got another one.
Okay.
Can I ask the city clerk to please pull up the proposed section F language that I sent before the meeting?
I can pull it up.
I can hardly keep up.
Oh, dang.
This one will take a little bit longer. I have a feeling this. So I move to revise section F of MICC. Sorry. 19.06.130 as amended on the screen.
Can't read it.
If we can get to a second, I can go through this in more detail too.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Vice Chair Gibson to replace current section F in 130 with section F that he has proposed on the board. And that has been seconded by Commissioner Acuse. This is for 19.06130F. Can we just take a second to read it, maybe?
Yeah, I guess let me, before we start jumping into the content of this, I just want to provide a little bit of context of how we got to this point. So we received the draft on Thursday. And then between all the commissioners received a large amount of comments on this regulation. And then just got responses today. Most of these substantive comments that were received were in relation to this section F, which is a new section that didn't exist at our previous meeting. And we are seeing for the first time as a group. What I've drafted here is a attempt to reconcile the comments received related to section F amongst the commissioners, as well as reconcile the staff responses and feedback that we've received. So even beyond the planning matrix and responses, there are some updates in here that staff has been able to review and we'll be able to talk about in this one by one. Thank you.
So Vice Chair, I just want to make sure I understand that section F in its entirety as you are looking at right now is what your amendment is.
Correct.
Thank you.
You think we should take like a short break to read this and let staff?
That's a decent proposal. Yeah.
What do you think, Deputy Clerk? Should we take a 10-minute break and that way some of the staff can get up, move around and we can read this?
I think that's a good idea. And I just sent it to our city attorney as well.
Oh, excellent. All right. Let's see. I have 7:25. Why don't we take a 10-minute break? Come back at 7:35. Meeting is in recess. the meeting back into order, and I believe we have a proposed amendment from Vice Chair Gibson to replace section F in MICC 19.06.130. I believe it was seconded by Commissioner Acuse. Is that correct, Deputy Clerk?
Yes.
All right. So, can you discuss this for us, Vice Chair?
Yes. So again, the intent here was to try to reconcile a handful of various comments related to section F and respond or adjust the amendments to meet the recommendations of staff as well. That at least is the intent. I know this is also the first time staff seeing it since this happened right before the meeting. So I think I'd like the opportunity for the staff to comment or kind of give their opinion on the draft as they see it.
I just wanted to quickly comment on kind of procedurally how we got to this. You earlier said, this is the first time that the commission has seen this section of code drafted, which is true. However, it was drafted directly to respond to the feedback and direction that the commission gave at the June 10th meeting. And I just wanted to make sure that was clear for the record, that this is just providing another level of detail and specificity based on the commission's feedback. Thank you.
Comments? I'll make some comments. It's bothers me. It's bothered me from the very beginning that we are being asked to adopt an entire ordinance based on the council's granting of to the country club of the bubble, and that all of this is being driven by that. Allowing structures that exceed the regulatory limits in the residential zones never been done before. It's everything I've fought against for the last 13 years. Basic land use law is you do not give conditional use permits in a zone greater regulatory limits than the uses in the zone. But 2018, the council adopted an amendment to the comprehensive plan called the community facility zone. And that was to allow greater regulatory limits. And it was so unpopular that the council had to repeal it in a very public meeting. That said, we have 4 main regulatory limits. We have gross floor area to lot area ratio, which is really tough in this situation because this being 3 different levels, when you get into declaratory space, it's a massive amount of gross floor area, and the country club so exceeds any of the regulatory limits. We have yard setbacks, we have lot coverage or impervious surface and height. So when I look at this, it's something. I can support this. It's something that limits this. I'm going to make one amendment to it before it's adopted. But I want to let everybody else speak. I think that the only regulatory limits that we really have that we can use are the yard setbacks, if it's from a residential structure or house. And I thought that was really well done. And using gross floor area as a part of the total lot, I thought that was really helpful. We can't do much on height because it has to be 40 feet. And then I think that we should have 0 lot coverage because we're talking about these temporary structures that theoretically are over already existing impervious surfaces. So those are mine. I can support this. I am going to move to increase the 50 to 250 after we have a discussion, because since this is a significant public benefit, it needs to serve a significant number of islanders. There's 26,000. You know, I'm thinking 250. I don't think any cup has fewer than 250. I think the beach club at 500 is the smallest. So I don't think that that's going to be a big change. Any other commissioners on this?
I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask of JB, just in terms of the background and the thinking behind it, please. Item number 2, so F, line item 2, temporary structure must be accessory to the established use of the property. Can you help root that in terms of what the intent is?
Yeah, I think the intent here is to not entitle additional uses that would not have been allowed prior. So I think the example that I discussed with staff earlier was you know, a church could not put a bubble up for a tennis facility. And so they would have to stick within the uses that are already established on the site.
Okay. So for example, if a church wanted to do a garage sale or wanted to do a food vendor, the church would probably be able to be allowed to do that.
Right. This section applies to deviations for temporary uses ultimately greater than 7 days. So, you know, most of those examples would fall
Sure.
within the 7-day limit and fall under a different, you know, category. But if it went longer than 7 days and they wanted to put up a structure accordingly, they'd have to go through this. Yeah. And they'd have to prove that that use is accessory to their existing use would be the requirement of item 2.
I might go back and do a little bit of clarification associated with the established use. You know, perhaps it's compliant use or something along that line, but we could talk that through shortly. Item number 3, can you talk about the thinking around permanent vegetative screen? I mean, how would that be enforced? Under what time limits? How?
Right. So I think one clarification to make here is that it would be either temporary or permanent. It would not be required to be permanent, since the nature of the structure is temporary, that, you know, the screening itself could be temporary as well. Or the screening could be permanent, and, you know, that would be acceptable in that case. So the intent here is to provide some flexibility, but ultimately, if there is going to be a structure that's erected for up to 180 days in a year, that there's some mitigating efforts so that you're not having to look at something that goes outside of the kind of area and bulk regulations that the rest of the structures in the neighborhood have to comply with.
Regarding that vegetation, is the language precise enough to be objective standard? Question for the city. Typically, you see language that stipulates a number of feet of buffer or things like that. Do we need to work on this language to add some sort of number, and would that relate to maybe what was, if there was any required for the bubble, what that number would be for that structure?
I think the commission certainly could add more specificity to this, but I don't think it's strictly necessary. You know, this talks about sufficient screening from adjacent residentially zoned properties and public right of way to mitigate visual effects. So I think that gives us a pretty strong sense of what it's looking for in terms of, you know, obscuring the view of this temporary use from the residential properties and the right of way. I think, you know, because there's the opportunity here to deviate from certain standards, including setbacks, you could go to a 0 setback in some cases. There needs to be some flexibility for the screening to be able to fit in what could be a quite small or non-existent setback. So this could look like some sort of fence, or it could look like vegetation
Mhm.
or something else.
And why is the 0 setback necessary? Because I didn't see that being required to permit the bubble.
I think that's just what's being proposed here by Vice Chair Gibson.
Yeah, I can jump in here. I assumed that the 0 foot setback was required for the bubble. If that's not the case, then I would support an amendment to increase the setback accordingly.
I think it's 4 feet.
And a 1/4 inch.
4 feet.
Mr.
We
President.
could round it down to
They measured
4.
it very carefully.
Well, if we amend this, do you want 4 or 4 why don't we do 4? Because 4 and a
4.
quarter just looks so blatant. We just have a
Yes.
picture of the bubble.
Well, that should be the height limit.
Okay.
Can we get clarification on the item? Because I'm seeing that is in Exhibit 1, page 7, the staff suggestion is yard setbacks may be reduced to 0 feet. So this wasn't, to my understanding,
Yeah.
was this JB's original note, or was this a response to something we said at the last meeting?
What log item are you referring to?
No, there.
I'm
she's
referring
looking
to
at-
Exhibit 1, page 7.
Oh,
And so if this is staff's response to what we said at the last meeting, yard setbacks may be reduced to 0 feet. If that comes from staff, it would be good to be refreshed on what we said at the last meeting regarding that. So we're not contradicting ourselves.
That didn't come from any direction from the last meeting specifically.
Okay.
That was just a number that we put in there and then increase that or not allow it to be reduced less than 10 feet or 4 feet if it exceeds the height. It was just an easily enforceable number.
I have a question. His section B on the second page. I guess it would be, I don't know what number it is. But it gives 2 options: maximum lot coverage, additional lot coverage from temporary structures would be 0 or 5%. Do you know if the country club bubble requires additional lot coverage to cover their tennis courts?
Yeah, so one clarification in the code or a distinction that's made is there is a difference between hardscape and lot coverage. Lot coverage is specifically roof areas and driving surfaces, and hardscape has a lengthy definition, but pavers, sidewalks, things like that. So the tennis courts right now would be considered hardscape, and putting a roof structure over that would then turn that into lot coverage. So yes, the tennis bubble does increase the lot coverage that's on the lot. So we would recommend the alternative for that. And another point there is that the tennis bubble is, let's see, what did I have here? 23,800 square feet. So the 5% would not be sufficient enough to cover that. We would need to raise it, I think, to at least 10%.
Could we change it to hardscape? Doesn't increase the hardscape?
So the tennis bubble then becomes lot coverage. So they are reducing their hardscape by turning the hardscape into roof area. So that 23,800 would come out of their current hardscape calculation and go into their lot coverage calculation. So we would need some kind of allowance for that lot coverage.
So I'm confused. Is it 23,800 total gross floor area or total square footage of the tennis courts?
It's both. The dimensions of the tennis bubble are around 200 and 200 by 105 or something. Let me just pull it up.
But then do you have claratory space where it gets counted as 2 and 3 times as it goes to what, 12, 20?
Yes, so yeah, that's a good point. So the gross floor area would probably need to be increased more there.
I see. Okay, so the 23,000 is actually the square
The-
foot
yeah.
of the tennis court.
The footprint, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that actually does raise the point of the gross floor area, which then anything over 16 feet in ceiling height gets counted as 200% of gross floor area. So I think that gross floor area would need to be 20% to fit the tennis bubble.
That's good.
Yes, Commissioner Hughes.
I'm still a little confused on definitions here, and maybe Commissioner Gibson or staff could address this. So you've got on 6A, maximum gross floor area for temporary structures shall be 10% of the lot area. And then the next one is maximum lot coverage for temporary structures shall be limited to 5%. And I'm struggling with definitions here. It's just my ignorance. Gross floor area versus lot coverage, because it sounds like in this case, they're one and the same. They're not.
No, so there's kind of three limitations on the coverage of lots in the residential zone. There's gross floor area, which is the floor area bounded by the exterior faces of a building. And then that's, compounded by your main floor, your second floor, any extra ceiling height. There's a specific calculation that we have in the code that we use to determine gross floor area. Your lot coverage and hardscape is just your footprint as an
Okay.
aerial view on the lot. And so we're not looking at any height or anything in lot coverage or hardscape.
So when you cover hardscape, it becomes lot coverage.
If you cover it with a roof, yes.
And then if you goes above 15 feet, it's double
For gross floor area.
for gross. Okay. I have some comments. Can I share some comments? I think several of these items to me strike me as very similar or identical to what staff has written. That's F1, F4. I appreciate and agree with number 2 in this amendment. But I'm struggling with item 3 because it seems it's not going to meet our arbitrary code requirements. I think Commissioner Perez might have alluded to this earlier. And I think we could possibly resolve this by using the staff recommendation and just instead of staff recommendation, modifying that to say or permanent vegetation, because I do appreciate that it shouldn't, the way the staff alternative is written, it just says temporary, which, almost implies that you wouldn't do some permanent vegetative. So I think you could put either there. But I think that other provisions in this amendment for item 3 are a little too arbitrary. And then for item 6, A and B, I mean, as we've discussed, that would already put the bubble out of compliance. And they just seem really, really conservative. I don't know if we can consider the tennis bubble is massive, and it's probably the most massive thing that we'll ever have to deal with in terms of temporary structure. And I can appreciate the desire not to have like a whole bunch of those everywhere. So I don't know how we address that.
Yeah, I can respond to.
Terrible. Bail out.
So on item 3, I think the key part that at least is important to me, on the screening side is that last piece, to mitigate visual effects created by the deviation. The intent here is to try to create some proportionality to what bulk, deviations are being made and then the screening required for it. So if, the size is much bigger or outside of setback areas, that screening needs to cover those specific aspects of it. So the proportionality piece of it is really what I'm trying to drive at here, or at least the intent of it. And that's what I'm trying to do with that last portion of item 3. As it relates to item 6, I think we're all responding to information in real time here, but I would be a proponent of revising A to 20 feet to align with the the current bubble. Item B would also increase to 10% for the same reason. And then I would say item D, the yard setback would be reduced to 4 feet to align with the existing. And I am taking notes here, so I will be able to send our city clerk a revised Word document once we get down the road.
So you'll be making
I will likely rescind my motion and submit a new motion.
you're gonna add 250 rather than 50, as long as you.
Do we have another day for this, or is this our last day for this
This is our
on the
last day.
schedule? Because I just want to say thank you for responding to my comments, and with those changes, I could probably get behind this so we could move forward.
So as a matter of process, if Vice Chair Gibson is going to withdraw his motion, I would need Commissioner Hughes to withdraw her second.
Can I instead make a friendly amendment? Or not a friendly amendment? Can I make an amendment, or can Chair Gibson make an amendment to make the changes that were just discussed?
No, you have to withdraw your motion and he's going to do all the changes in the new motion.
I think we should get through the discussion piece and then I can probably do a catch-all revised motion, but
Okay,
I think
I
there's a
was
couple
just-
other topics in here worth exploring.
That makes sense.
Okay, continue. What else?
The 250 question. I assume the country club easily meets that.
They have like 2,500.
Okay.
Wait, that's staff, Molly?
Yeah, thank you. We did have one other concern in 6D, D2, for the temporary structure shall not encroach into a setback where any other temporary structure adjacent property encroaches into their setback. We were kind of looking to see maybe what the intent of that one is, and if we could maybe workshop that one to be a little bit clearer for administrating.
Yeah, the intent here was there may be non-conforming cases on the island where there's an existing structure across the property line within the setback, which may be non-conforming or, whatever the case is. But if that's the case, maybe this is not necessary. I think, I'm really getting at separation for fire code and that kind of stuff. But since they have to comply with fire codes anyways, I'm assuming that already comes into play without this.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's issues with this one where someone's structures on their adjacent property would prohibit someone else from putting something on their property. And if the concern is fire code, then that would be addressed in the other criteria.
Right. So then I guess, again, this is a pretty low likelihood scenario, but let's say another temporary structure wanted to be put on the same property line and take the same deviations. You wouldn't want them back to back and try to address that. I'm not sure if that's a real concern, and I would be open to striking item 2 altogether if there's other provisions in the code elsewhere in the fire code and so on that would address that.
Are there any back-to-back cups?
There's the horse stables immediately adjacent to
No, you're right.
the country club.
Yes.
A lot of non-conforming
Yeah,
cases.
I think it's a very, very specific situation that was trying to address, but I recognize that. No, I would
It's
be
not-
okay
it's-
striking it.
It's not bad though. I mean, because you limit it to, if we take out the 0 and go to 4 feet, each one has to do 4 feet, If you get away from the, facade, increase and stuff, what is it? It's 15 total, right? And then a little bit higher for the height, but these are 2 conditional use permits. If we just leave it at 4 feet, they're still gonna be 8 feet apart.
Yeah, so I think I'm okay striking this.
I have a question though. It says yard setbacks, this is D, may be reduced to 4 feet. Subject to the following, does that mean that, number one, if, it's adjacent to a property with an established residential use? That means, it would just be the regular setback?
Correct.
Okay. Is that clear enough to staff? Okay, great. All right, so.
I just wanted to add, and I don't know if you guys saw some of the comments I put about the fire code. It seems to me that some things, land use code is dictating certain things, but the fire code is likely dictating in a situation of the bubble, much larger setback. In the plans, it shows 50 feet to the next structure, which I guess the horse barn does meet. It's like 70 some feet. So in effect, I think, I don't know what the deal was with the adjacent property owner, but they must have agreed to this, that they literally just now can't build anything in that zone, which I think will further restrict if you are doing an air supported structure like this. There's gonna be very limited situations where this could actually be built. It needs to be surrounded by a lot of land.
Yeah.
Unless they're
Do you know,
doing.
Molly or Allison, I mean, did the owners of the horse farm agree to a 50-foot setback? That might solve our problem there.
I think they did. I think there was.
And there's another setback on the plans of like
Neither of us know
17
the
feet.
exact, the exact final solution was here, but I know there was a discussion of fire separation and a requirement for some sort of easement or agreement with that adjacent property owner that they would not build another building within that separation area, you know, in the time that this bubble is there.
So I don't know if the land use, in this case, it seems like the land use code and the building and fire code, they're kind of doing two separate things. And one is more stringent than the other, which sort of dictated the overall package that was approvable. But try to put it on another lot, well, situation might be completely different. It happened to work there because of the circumstances. It was very close to a property line, but then the next building over was not.
Correct.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so. Commissioner Hughes, you were indicating maybe you had.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the item 3 because it sounds like we're getting pretty close. In the staff version, this is item 5. And theirs says for temporary structures that do not meet the development standards in the underlying zone and will be erected for more than 30 days. That's when this screening thing applies. And that is not included in your note. So I'm wondering if we can hybridize these.
Yeah, I think we'd be talking about a scenario where there's a temporary structure between the 7-day threshold and then this 30-day threshold. I think that's a pretty narrow, especially if they're gonna go through this process for to try to get a permit approved, temporary use permit approved. I think it's just a very narrow scenario where that actually applies. But even so, if my neighbor was putting something up for a month, I'd want it screened for a month.
Well, I'm thinking about like the tree lot has a building. The Christmas tree lot.
And has
Is it screened by Christmas trees?
There's your.
It is not screened by the Christmas trees. The building screens the trees. I think there are some scenarios where like fundraising kind of scenarios and whatnot, where there might be a temporary structure that kind of looks like a tiny contractor building. Where did the 30 days come from? And I just don't want the tree lot to not happen or some other items.
I think that was just a length of time that something could be erected that would maybe need screening and have impacts to the surrounding area.
Does the tree lot building exceed the regulatory limits? It doesn't. I mean, it's a pretty tiny, it's a trailer.
It's a tent as well.
Yeah, but I mean, we're talking here, this is about temporary uses for non-conforming structures. So, I mean, I don't think that you would
Yeah.
run into any problem. That would fall into section E or.
Right. I guess there's two different ways to look at this. They would either be, their path to compliance would be complying with section E, which would be meeting the regulatory requirements, or complying with section F, which would mean they'd have to do some more screening. But it would not preclude them from the building. It would just make them do some screening for the portion that is exceeding the regulatory limits.
Do you want to make the changes? Withdraw your motion? Withdraw it
Yeah,
so
unless
that
there's
we
any
can
more
get the new
discussion.
One up there that's a little closer.
Do I have to go first?
No, he's gonna.
Is there more
Are we
discussion?
doing? Is it a motion to rescind or just, I would request to rescind my motion.
That's all you need to do. And then I just need Commissioner Hughes to do the same.
I rescind my second.
Thank you.
Okay, so it'd be the 250. 20% on lot area, 10% on lot coverage, 20% on the gross floor area.
All right, I just sent the email, so that's coming through. I'd like to make a motion to revise section F as presented on the screen.
Is there a second? I'll second it. There's been a motion by Vice Chair Gibson to replace section F in MICC. I think I know it by now. 19.06.130 with the language that has been submitted to the clerk and is on the board. Okay.
So Chair, if we could just take a minute, we're getting some printed copies for the commission and I would like to make sure that others not in the room have this copy as well.
All right.
Thank you.
This might all be. That's 4 months later. I just didn't put you into it. I don't know. All right. Okay, as we can see, proposed amendment F has been placed up. If I understand, in section 4B, 50 people has been replaced by 250. In section 6A, maximum gross floor area has been increased to 20% from 10%. On 6B, maximum lot coverage shall be 10% of the lot area. Section D, 0 has been changed to 4 feet for setbacks, and section 2 has been deleted. Is that correct?
That's all correct.
Okay, any
Yeah.
yes. Okay.
I just would like staff to confirm that the tree lot or something like that would be allowed under this revision.
If it meets the regulatory limits of the zone, the setbacks, the height limits, et cetera, it would not fall under these provisions. So I think the tree lot should most likely meet the regulatory limits of its zone and would not be subject to this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hughes.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, anybody else have some motions that they would like to make? Okay, then I'd like to make a motion. I would like to amend section G, time limitation, and delete the section, the code official may grant an extension not to exceed 30 days per calendar year. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. These structures are so large and so non-conforming. I think the 180 days meets the principle. If you're need winter coverage, October 1 to April 1. If it's summer, for some summer structure, it gets you through the spring and summer and fall. So, and there's really no criteria in here whether you would get an extension. So I worry that it would just be automatic. And now we're to 7 months a year for a quote unquote temporary. So my thinking is 180 days without discretion to extend it is reasonable. Any other discussion? Oh, yes. Okay.
I'd like to ask staff a question about the intent. And I'm wondering if this is just a matter of wording. When you issue the temporary use permit, I'm assuming it has a specific number of days assigned to it. And was the intent here, if you issued one for 60 days, they could extend it to 30 days, not to exceed 100 days? Or was it indeed to go up to 210 days?
Yeah, the maximum would be the 180 days with a 30-day extension, so 210 days.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments?
I think there was a response in some of the June 10th notes about this, that somebody said that the bubble actually needed those additional 30 days. I don't know why. Was it for the erection and disassembly process outside of the 180 days or?
I don't know if it was needed as so much as what they have requested and wanted
Okay.
in terms of their operations and kind of the weather needs for playing tennis in Washington State, I guess.
So the fire code says 180 days to qualify as a temporary building. So that language will align with the fire code. I just wasn't sure if there was like the time what's counted from 180 days, is that from the time it is actually fully erect? I think it would be. So the staging and all that, I don't think would count toward the 180 days.
I think that's correct. And my understanding when these timeframes were initially developed in the interim regulations was that was based on provisions in the building code that classify a temporary use for 180 days and do allow a 30-day extension.
I don't know if the building code necessarily allows the 30-day extension, but if they were to go past that 180 days in the building code, other building code requirements would then kick in at that point. So it would need to be constructed to different standards other than the temporary standards. I believe it's the same for the fire code.
I'm wondering if part of the issue here is that the country club allows Mercer Island High School to use its facilities in the spring. And therefore you're running up against not just summertime, but spring need for the high school. Is that part of the reason for 7 months instead of 6 months?
I don't know that we can speak to exactly what the country club was. I just don't know exactly what they were looking for, intending with the timeline. I imagine it does need to align with like high school tennis season or something like that.
Yeah, no, it does need to align with high school tennis season. The high school is fairly dependent on that use, so I don't want to.
I know there was
I
quite a bit
agree
of,
that 7 months is quite a lot for temporary use, but I also don't want to make it impossible for the Mercer Island High School girls tennis team to conduct business.
yeah, I know there was quite a bit of public comment when this was initially reviewed by the city council for the interim regulations from the high school tennis team and other users that were looking to see this happen.
Right. No, I do remember that. It was moving testimony, but there's nothing that says that they have to erect it October first. If, you know, if they want to go all the way through April, they can erect it November first. It sounds to me like 180 days is more consistent with the building code and the fire code. And, you know, I think fair, not just for these neighbors, but other neighbors that are going to have these non-conforming structures. So that's why I made the motion. Is there anything further, or we ready for a vote? Sounds like we are. Please call the roll.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Nay.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay, don't think. Can we just take 1 minute so everybody can make sure that they don't have?
I got a motion if I can just keep going here.
Okay,
I move to accept amendment per log number 2.
is there a second? I'll second that. So, Vice Chair Gibson has proposed his log 2 amendment to 19.06.130D, which adds the language within any given 90-day period to the end of that. I seconded it. Can you explain why you think this is important?
Yeah, it puts a similar kind of restraint on how often you can repeatedly put up a temporary structure, similar to item 1 above. Right now, this basically says you can not comply with the underlying development or zone requirements if your duration is less than 48 hours. Theoretically, you could put something up for 48 hours, take it down for a couple days, put it back up for a couple hours. The example that comes to mind is somebody running like a food truck on their property. And you wouldn't want a food truck to have the ability to continue to come back frequently. And so putting a 90-day restriction on it would make it so that they could only have this 48-hour allowance every 90 days.
Right.
I'm more concerned with putting some sort of period on there that spreads out the use than real. I'm not as married to the 90-day duration. I think, that can be a thoughtful discussion amongst us, but at least putting some sort of spacing on how frequent you can have this entitlement is what I'm going for.
All right, so this, as I read this is for structures that cannot meet the development standards. So, I don't know. Who's gonna put one up for 48 hours and take it back down, but what's your idea?
Are we thinking the tent kind of event for a graduation party or a wedding, or is this a scenario that we're
Yeah.
thinking?
Yeah, so in this scenario, you could have a food truck pull up to your property and operate for less than 48 hours, and it be allowable.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Eh,
a use, right.
Right, yeah,
Right.
there's a use aspect to this, that's probably more important than the structure, about what's allowed on the property.
Is this, sorry, I'm getting lost because we've done so
Commissioner
many.
Matthews. Please.
Is this just in residential or would this also apply to commercial properties? And I'm thinking about like, I know the high school isn't a commercial property, but what if it's a private high school or a private school? They might want to have a food truck every month, or during football season, they might have one every week. And if this were just residential, I would be in agreement with it, but if this covers commercial properties as well, it might be a little aggressive.
Yeah, it would cover all private property, is what this covers. So public property it would not apply to. So if you're thinking of high school or something like that. And then if we're talking about the specific use, like the food truck, there are zones that allow that as a use, so it wouldn't necessarily kick in there. But on the residential properties, this would definitely apply if we're using the food truck example.
Right, because it's a temporary use, it doesn't meet. So I noticed that up in number one above, it does have restrictions, 7 days within a given 90-day period. And now I can understand what you're sitting there saying. You don't want a truck to go 48 hours and then 1 day off and then back and 1 day off. So I guess we're looking at 30, 60, 90 days. I mean, I'm comfortable with any of those.
Right, I would be comfortable too, but I think my main point is putting some sort of spacing out of how often you can take advantage of this 48-hour entitlement.
What do you think, Commissioner Perez?
I think my only point is are we creating an issue that are we creating a requirement or a prohibition against something that does not exist? However, in that same breath, I think that as we increase density on the island and this may be eventually become an issue potentially. So,
I'd like to have some restriction myself. I guess applying for a permit every 48 hours is probably not the easiest thing for a food truck operator, but maybe 90 days is a little long.
Can we,
Yeah, I
can we-
clarified just quickly on that. This is a part of the exemptions section of the regulation, and so these are saying that you don't need a permit.
Oh, that's right. Okay, thanks. So, but is there a time period that you'd be more comfortable with than 90 days?
I'm less concerned about the time period and more concerned about delineating residential versus commercial. Because I think it makes just fine sense for residential. Although I do think 30 or 60 days is more reasonable, but it just doesn't seem quite fair to say a commercial property couldn't have a food truck come for I'm like thinking of what are they called? What are those software video game guys? Riot.
Oh, yeah.
If Riot wants to have a food truck on their lot, every couple of weeks, I don't think that's a big deal personally, but I can see it being a nuisance in a neighborhood.
I think in those commercial zones, a food truck is an allowable use and therefore wouldn't have to deviate from this standard. Or it would fall into probably section 1 of here.
All right,
Just a question, JB, on the 48 hours. Just thinking like if you're putting up a tent, would there be a scenario where you have 1 day of setup, 1 day of event, 1 day of takedown, and would 72 hours make more sense?
I'm sure there could be.
I just said for the tennis bubble settled down.
That's fine.
Well, okay. So what?
You
Yeah.
know, you know,
What
Set-
counts towards the 48 hours?
so you're actually, you want to change the 48 hours and he wants to add in some type of within. I know, I thought we already exempted tents and stuff like that.
Subject to these time constraints.
So, I mean, a tent and stuff is gonna meet. All right. What do you think, everybody? Should we increase it from 48 to 72 hours for put up, take down time, but then, 60 or 90 days? I don't know how many weddings people are gonna have in the summer. You like 60 or 90 days?
60?
60.
All
60
right.
also.
You want to withdraw your motion and then redo it, so I don't have to do an amendment to an amendment? I think that's easier.
I can do that. Do we want to get a nod on 48 hours versus 72?
Yeah.
Yeah, so 72.
Sure.
All right. I'd like to rescind my motion, please.
Yeah, and I agree as the second. Okay, you want a new motion?
I move to revise section D2 to read any temporary use or structure that cannot meet the development standards of the underlying zone applicable to the site in which the temporary use or structure is located may be allowable with a maximum duration of 72 hours within any 60-day period as presented on the screen.
Is there a second?
I second.
All right. Do we need further discussion or are we ready for a vote? Please call the vote.
Commissioner Accuse? Aye. Commissioner Neese?
Aye.
Chair Thompson?
Aye.
Commissioner Perez?
Aye.
And Vice Chair Gibson?
Aye.
Thank you.
Does
Uh,
anybody else have any motions that they would like to make?
Chair, this is Allison. Staff would like to request a 10 to 15-minute recess to confer with legal counsel. I received a message from Kim Adams Pratt and she wanted to discuss some concerns about, the threshold at which we might trigger the need for a second public hearing with us.
Okay. Let's see. It is, what I got, 8:30. Shall we do 10 minutes or you need 15?
10 is probably fine.
Okay, the meeting's adjourned until 8:40.
Thank you.
The meeting's back in order and it is 8:45. And what do you have to report, Allison?
Yeah, thank you. We conferred with the attorney, Kim Adams Pratt, and we feel that we do need to go to a second public hearing, given just the breadth of the changes that are being discussed tonight. And so we talked a little bit about how we could potentially fit that in the schedule sooner rather than later. And we think it will be possible to make it happen on September 10th. So that's what we want to recommend is, conclude any additional amendments that the commission would like to make tonight, and then direct staff to prepare a final draft for a second public hearing on September 10th. Hopefully, knock on wood, that can be a fairly short hearing and discussion, given that we've resolved a lot of the open questions here tonight. We just want to give the public a chance to view all of those changes, since a lot of it's really been in flux here in the last few days.
You mean the public?
Well, I'm sure there's others that could be watching remotely or viewing the video at a later time.
All right, Commissioner Perez, any amendments that you have?
Not.
Commissioner Accuse?
I do not have any amendments, but I do have a clarifying question about that need of a second public hearing. Is it, I mean, everything we discussed tonight seemed to be things that were staff responding to what we discussed at the last meeting. So even though it was quite a lot, we did discuss it at the last meeting. Is there some, like, what's the threshold there? That'd be helpful to understand.
I'll let Kim take that. She can speak to the law as far as that goes.
So what we need to look at is what the public had to view in that June 10 packet. So not necessarily what was said at the meeting, because they could have looked at that June 10 packet and been like, oh, okay, I'm fine with all this. But then you guys did a lot of work during that June 10 meeting, and it's evolved since then, especially this deviation section. So that's what I'm going back to, is what was in the packet.
Okay, thank you.
I'm afraid to ask, but Vice Chair Gibson, do you have any more amendments?
I'm done for tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Neese?
Yeah, a couple items I'd like to discuss. Log 29 was one of them. This is an amendment that would insert a new exemption for any temporary structure under used for worship under 250 square feet in area and 10 feet in height, erected for no more than a total of 15 calendar days in any 365-day period. Thinking here, oh, sorry, I'd like to make a motion to amend to add log 29.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Neese has moved to include log 9 to MICC 19.06 130D5. The language in there, it was seconded by Vice Chair Gibson. Commissioner Neese, could you speak to it, please?
Yeah, just understanding that Island has a lot of Jewish population. I was thinking in October they have they erect sukkahs that are up for about 8 days, but often have some period of time where they need to be erected ahead of time and taken down after. And so this is an amendment that would allow for that. Maybe there are other things that it could apply for, I'm sure, for other religions, but I just looking through the list, I felt like this was missing from the other exemptions, but also if somebody else point out where they might be permitted, happy to discuss.
Is there any other?
So if I'm understanding this correctly, you want them to be able to, or want this exemption so that these structures used for worship can be erected without a permit, instead of going through the permitting process for a temp structure. Correct?
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is probably happening already, and there's just no formal acknowledgement.
Commissioner Hughes? Yeah. No?
Majors,
Huh?
majors, same thing.
Okay, all right, please call the vote.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Chair Thompson,
Aye.
and Commissioner Neese.
Aye.
Do you have another one, Commissioner Neese?
Yes, I don't feel as strongly about this one, but I thought it might be worth a little bit more discussion, and that's log 16. And the amendment would be to strike no music or sound is amplified. And I motion to strike that no music or sound is amplified.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Commissioner Neese has proposed amendment log 16 to 19.06.050 D3C to strike the language that prohibits amplified music.
Yeah, so I just, almost all music is amplified these days. And so what does it leave that isn't? And so live music that is just sung without amplification, or a wind-up toy or something like that. I mean, there's not a lot left. So is this soft music played from speakers that we're trying to allow? I guess that's the question, is what are we trying to allow? And is certainly the amendment could be something other than striking this, if we could come up with language. I didn't really come up with an amendment of different language, but I wondered if we're trying to just prevent obnoxious music. Is that already covered in the language that's above that says the business operation does not generate litter, noise, or other nuisances?
Well, I'll speak to it since I work in the town center and walk around it quite a bit. A lot of the amplified music is annoying. People get a really bad speaker. They put out a bucket, for coins. They are terrible musicians, and it's kind of screechy, that's the problem. But I also know what you're saying. Like, for example, once Barrels had an outdoor band. How do we allow good amplified music in the town center? Allison, do you have any ideas how you would do that? I mean, would you audition them? Yes.
So I think we discussed this at the last meeting, and I had proposed that music amplification be limited to state laws, and Allison said that was redundant to existing state law. And it wasn't necessary to clarify that, but then I got outvoted for striking this before, but you weren't here, so I don't know that we actually technically can revisit this again.
Well, I think we can. We can do anything. I mean, let's just get it right, is what I'm saying.
Because I'm in agreement with striking it,
You're.
but I don't think busking is legal, is it?
Well, I don't think it would fall under a temporary use permit.
They wouldn't be applying for a permit, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, Allison? What's your feeling?
I mean, as you said, I think a lot of existing businesses probably have some form of amplified sound at times. Like, many of them have outdoor patios and seating areas. I imagine they likely play music out there. I don't know.
Right. And there is some remedy, right? Like, somebody can complain if it's obnoxious, late, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's spelled out right here that any noise that would be objectionable to the public or the businesses in the immediate area is not allowed. So, you know, that could be considered a code violation and pursued, you know,
Okay.
through that avenue.
Commissioner Perez, what do you think?
I tend to think that it's covered as you were saying, Allison, in this. But I also stand with the, it is odd. No music or sound is amplified. So I
Okay.
stand with striking.
All right, see, Commissioner Hughes, you just gotta keep trying. No further questions. Can you call the roll?
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes. Aye. Commissioner Neese
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Are there any more amendments? Good. I'll go find my script. Is there anything that staff wants to mention or bring up to speed other than the outline that we got of the upcoming omnibus?
Chair, excuse me, we still need to vote on the main motion.
Oh, well, okay.
We're,
I think actually we want to hold that because we're not finalizing the recommendation tonight. We're going to be doing the second public hearing on September 10th. And so it would make sense to vote to table
I was
that
gonna say table it again.
again,
Okay.
and then we can pick it back up
Thank you for that
after that
reminder.
public hearing.
It says now we move to other business. Is there a staff report this evening?
But first.
I'd
we
like
need
to
make-
move that we table the main motion until September 10th when we have the second public hearing.
Second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Commissioner Neese,
Aye.
Commissioner Perez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson.
Aye.
Commissioner Hughes
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any staff?
Yeah, I
updates
do have
or-
a few things. I think we covered a few of these, so I'll try to keep it brief, but just wanted to go over some kind of updates on what we're expecting to come forward for the rest of this year. First of all, there's no meeting in August. It'll be our legislative recess, so enjoy the rest of the summer. And then we have scheduled some special meetings in the fall to accommodate the omnibus work, and we're gonna squeeze in this second public hearing. So just to give you all those dates that we're looking at right now, September 10th, September 24th, October 8th, and October 22nd will be our next 4 meetings. And then the November and December meetings fall very close to holidays, and so we'd like to propose rescheduling those to alternate dates. We're looking at November 19th and December 10th for those. And if we don't hear any objections, we'll move forward with getting those scheduled as special meetings.
I'm sorry, Allison, could you read the first 3 again? September 10th, October 8th, the
September
22nd, but I didn't get
10th,
the
September
second.
24th,
Okay, thank you.
October 8th, October 22nd, and then November 19th and December 10th. And we'll send out calendar appointments for all those.
Thank you.
We did talk about the Growth Management Hearings Board appeal. Again, we're expecting a decision on that in early August, and that may affect our work plan this fall if there are findings from the board that we need to comply with, and we'll be updating you on that when we meet in September. I believe Adam or Molly mentioned the docket will be open from September 1st through October 1st. We'll be doing some noticing and advertising of that opportunity starting in August to make the public aware. The public, the planning commission can all propose ideas for the docket. We do request that anyone intending to make a proposal, if they can reach out to staff and kind of touch base with us, run your idea by us ahead of time, we can help you craft an amendment that, you know, works well with the code language and that sort of thing. So yeah, we're anticipating a pretty busy fall between finishing up the temporary uses item, the omnibus ordinance, anything that may come from the Growth Management Hearings Board. I think that will keep us quite busy through these meetings that we've now set forth. And then looking ahead, I don't think things will be slowing down either. In 2026, we'll be digging into the middle housing ADU and unit lot subdivision work that Adam mentioned earlier tonight. There's also a whole slew of new legislation that was adopted this year that has a number of deadlines between 2026 and 2029. So I think our next 4 years are really quite booked up in terms of legislative work. So we will be preparing, some more materials, providing an overview of what that looks like probably later in the year, but just wanted to kind of like let you know that we do expect things to continue to be busy for the time ahead of us.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Molly, on that, and Adam. There being no other business to come before the Planning Commission, the time is now 9 o'clock and the meeting is concluded. Please stay seated until city staff has terminated the broadcast.